Hi there, my name is Megan White. I'm a yoga teacher, and I thought instead of a flow today, I would do a tutorial on how you can use yoga blocks to help you in your yoga practice. So here's a set of blocks that I use, that I own. I got them at Target. I think they're about $10 a piece. I have two. They work great for me. S'more likes them as well. And so I've really enjoyed using these in my home practice. I also always grab a block when I walk into a yoga studio. Just a note for those who are watching about when I filmed this. I'm filming this in May of 2020. I live in California. We're currently under quarantine. Our yoga studios have not reopened here, but I did get a notice from the yoga studio that I go to that they're no longer going to have blocks available for students to grab before class. It's a safety concern, which makes sense. So they're asking that when they do reopen, that students bring their own blocks. So perhaps you've been thinking about getting blocks, but you practice at a studio or you're not sure you're really going to use them at home. Now might be a good time to grab them. Like I said, Target, Walmart, you can buy them on Amazon. I would recommend getting a heavier block. It just helps with stability, but it is definitely personal preference. And if you're not sure if you're going to use them, maybe try some of these moves with a book that you have at home or a canned good that's kind of big, about this size. Then you'll perhaps see if it'd be something that's worth investing in, but I've definitely found them helpful. So here are 10 ways that I use my yoga blocks. And the first one is for strengthening. And unfortunately, S'more is gonna move because I can't do this one with her sitting right here. So maybe she'll join us and do a little downward facing dog at some point as well. Or maybe she'll just go lay back on the couch. I don't blame her. But a great way to start to activate your arms, your shoulders before you start a yoga practice, because we do a lot of chaturangas, basically yoga push-ups essentially, is to go ahead and turn your triceps on, biceps on before class even starts. So I will put my blocks here and lower and come back up, thinking of shooting my elbows back to the back of the room. And you can even do this obviously non-yoga related. This is just a great way to strengthen those pesky triceps. So strengthening with your arms is a perfect way to do it. Strengthening with your abs. You can take one yoga block and do a yoga block pass through, unofficial name, this is what I call it, but it's a great way to engage the lower and the upper abs and core, right? So putting the block in between my feet, I'm going to lengthen my body out, come up and engage, and come all the way back. And do it again. So as I'm doing this, I'm forcing myself to really engage my lower abs and my upper abs as I reach up high and pass through. I've been in yoga classes where they've had us do this for a whole song, and it's really great. It's kind of fun too, because as you're passing, you're really hoping that you're not going to drop the block, which is a good distraction. I'll take you through a few other exercises that I do with blocks, and the block is just a good distraction. So an added bonus for some of those more challenging things. Speaking of challenging, let's go to balance with the yoga block. And I think this is something that people maybe traditionally think of for yoga. First and foremost, there is no embarrassment when you are in a yoga class to use a block for balance. In fact, I would highly recommend it. It's going to give you the confidence because it's going to bring the ground up to you and allow you to really just focus on the balance. And a great thing about blocks is they have 3 settings. So the first setting, I consider this setting 1, is the lowest setting. The second one, setting 2. The third one, setting 3. And so as you progress through your practice, maybe you start off using this setting, and then you can come here, and then you can come here, and then perhaps one day for that little balance pose that you were struggling with, all of a sudden try it without the block and you're nailing it. So let's go ahead and move through half moon, which is a great balancing pose and a wonderful one to use the block for. So I'm going to start by showing you it on the highest setting, like so. Don't need 2 blocks for this one. I'm just gonna come into half moon My hand is firmly on the block. I think of rotating my hips open, activating my elevated foot, and reaching up through. So that's a great way to do half moon if you're just, here's traditional half moon without the block, right? Like, and it gets called a lot in yoga classes. So we're just activating, coming down to the ground. For really active, you can keep your hand off the ground. Here, it's also a beautiful, nice stretch, but a little bit easier because they do have the support of the ground. But if my legs aren't flexible quite yet, and I can't reach the ground, this pose is not lost, it's the block. So highest setting is great. This setting, the second setting, I will use sometimes in half moon just because it feels really good. So I'm opening up through here. And then the last setting, all the way down to the ground here. And soon before you know it, you ditch the block and you're in a flow, and it's a really fun, wonderful pose. But starting out with the block is the best way to learn it and to do it safely. Another way I love to use the block is in yin. So you can certainly use it in yin if you're sitting like so, and you want to put it, and this actually works in yoga classes too. If your knees don't reach the ground, which mine do not, it's an anatomy thing. They probably won't ever, so I can put the blocks here. But what I love in yin is called heart opener. And so 2 different ways to do this setup. This is going to be for your head. This is going to go between your shoulder blades. I like to set it up like this. I'll show you a second option as well. We lean back, relax the head, really open up through the collarbones and stretch out here. I feel my whole back relax. I love this pose. So this is great, right? And you can't do this without blocks. Another way to do that same pose is to do this and come back through. You're gonna feel it a little different. But so that's wonderful, slow, delicious opening. For those who haven't tried yin yet, it's a very different feel to the class than a vinyasa flow, which is something that we're more used to here in America, sort of that repetitive, fast-moving yoga. Yin is 60, 75 minutes, but really slow poses that you hold for like 5 minutes. And the beauty is that you're opening up that connective tissue, opening up the muscle. So blocks and bolsters are really, really helpful in yin because the props help you kind of deepen those stretches. I'll show you another way we use the blocks for yin, but then also just a normal vinyasa class. It's backbends. Here I only use 1 block. Again, different setting options. Let me first show you the traditional backbend, which is bridge. So here's bridge. And I start to move my shoulders under my body and I push up. So it takes a lot of work, right? You feel it in your back, you're activating your legs. It's an awesome back bend. But what if you're not feeling quite like doing that day, or you're nervous about really pushing up and maybe you have a back injury or something along those lines and you need something more passive? Here's where the block comes into play. Again, using one of the 2 settings. So I can put my block underneath my lower back. I can work here if I'd like, seeing if I start to feel more confident and maybe staying. Or I can take my legs out and I can just let the block do all the work as my hips really open up. This setting is beautiful for that. This setting is a little more intense, but equally beautiful. And we can stretch out. So a lot of times towards the end of a yoga class, they'll call for back bends, and you can use your block here, or as I mentioned, yin. It's a wonderful addition to anyone's yin practice. So a more active way to do this is to engage your legs even more, your body even more. When you're going through a traditional Sun Salutation A by putting the block in between your thighs. So I'm gonna stand up for this one. So a lot of times people will forget to engage their legs. And if you engage your legs, you're really adding a strength dynamic to any yoga practice. So one way you can do this is going through Sun A's with a block in between the legs, because you can't relax your legs as you move through this flow. The block's gonna fall, right? So here I am. I'm going to reach up to the sky and then forward fold. I'll halfway lift, and now here's where the block really comes into play. Planting my hands, shooting my legs back, lowering to chaturanga, coming up through up dog, and then back through downward facing dog. I'm gonna look up, bend my knees, bring my feet to my hands, halfway lift, forward fold, reach up, exhale, mountain pose. So one of those, not too taxing, but if you do 5 Sun A's with the block, you're really gonna start to feel the difference that it makes when you're engaging your legs the whole time. It's a great way to add a strength dynamic to your practice. So I'd highly encourage you to maybe give that a try. Another way to use your block is to be able to really stretch and relax into a pose. So I'm gonna show you triangle. Triangle is one of my favorite poses to use with the block. So let me just show you traditional triangle first. I'm here, reaching out, tipping forward, and then tipping over. So you'll see a lot of people in class do this, and they consider, and this is triangle, and it's fine, but if you really want to activate the abs, you're going to keep the hand off the ground and stretch through here. This here, I'm really relying on my flexibility, and I'm kind of tipping my hip in. This, I'm really activating through the abs and stretching up. So how do we work here? Well, we can use the block, right? Even on a higher setting, and start to think about putting our hand away. Or if you want a more passive stretch in triangle, and this was what I meant by my favorite, it's not the more active one. It's really relying on the block to stretch through here. Feels really nice through the side body. Just making sure to keep a micro bend in the knee. But here's a great way to get into that triangle and feel a whole nother stretch. So next time you think about, should I pass on the block? Should I grab the block? Grab the block, try triangle, and let me know in the comments below what you think about it, because I think it adds an awesome dynamic. Another way to use the block is to access a pose that wasn't previously accessible. And here we're gonna go to crow. So, a lot of people are working on crow. It's a big move in yoga, but it can be a little scary, and it takes time. It takes time. Those tricep dips, very helpful in crow. But as you're learning it, you can come from an elevated position in crow, up on the block with the toes, hands out, and this is gonna give you some height so you can start to come into that crow. Right? So instead of having to come all the way from the ground, I got a little boost. Another little pro trick. If you have a bolster, or really if you just have a pillow, this setup is nice as you're learning crow. Gonna use the block here, but then also I don't have to worry about my head. So we're here, and we're playing with moving that weight into our hands. And if we tip over, we're just falling on the bolster. So, an awesome way to learn a pose that maybe is a little scary, such as crow, is with your block. Another way to really improve your practice, sort of more along the lines of doing the Sun A's with the block in between your legs, is to do planks and then play with blocks while you're doing it. So I'm gonna put this guy back here. And I'm gonna put my blocks wherever on my mat, because it doesn't matter, we're moving them. And the height, you can mess with this as well. So I'm gonna come into a strong plank pose. Super engaged here. And then I'm gonna move the blocks. So, and I need my feet just a little spread apart to do this. So here is the dynamic aspect of plank, which is normally a stationary move, but I'm moving the blocks all around. So the benefit here is obviously I have to stay really engaged. My mind is distracted doing something else. So if you have good music and you're moving blocks, plank doesn't seem so bad. But beyond all that, I'm on one hand sometimes. So I'm really focusing on engaging the core muscles, the legs, to keep me all balanced and to keep my shoulders sort of parallel with the mat, which is what you want. So an added strength tip if you're interested in that. And then my last tip for blocks is using them to gain confidence and accessing a pose that you couldn't previously. So this is a little different than what I was talking about with crow, with half moon, all great ways to use the blocks. But say you're like, I'm a little nervous about injury, I wanna play with a more dynamic move. Can I use my block there? Absolutely. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So we are gonna go from half moon to revolved half moon. I'm gonna put the block on the second setting, I think. Gives me a little bit more space. That is the nice thing about this second setting. Although this moves the block up higher, when the block is flat like that, you have that whole surface area to play with. So I'm going to come into half moon, activate, pull through. Now I want to move to revolved half moon. Now this can be a little scary, right? Because it's not a stagnant pose, but with the help of the block, the ground is so much closer and I can flip through. Move the block a little closer to me. Extending out through half moon. My left hand comes down and I revolve. So playing here is a lot less scary than all the way down here and you feel like you're gonna tip. So you're gaining confidence in your balance. That's a great way to do it. So those were 10 tips, 10 different ways you can use your blocks in your yoga practice to really add another layer to your practice, to help you develop more as a yoga student. But more than anything else, so many times in yoga classes, you see people pass by the blocks. As the yoga studios start to open up, I'm sure you'll see plenty of people who opt not to bring blocks. But there is no shame in the block game. I cannot encourage it enough. It will help you improve your practice. It adds a fun aspect. Oh, and I forgot, here's a bonus tip. I had 10, this is 11. Sit on your block. A lot of people will start practice or end practice in a seat, and when you put a block underneath your tush, you're elevating your whole self up, and it takes a lot of pressure off your knees. So if you're like me and your anatomy is just never gonna let those knees come all the way down to the ground, unless I do like this, and now I'm tipping forward and I'm all out of alignment, just do what feels right. Do what feels good. How can you meditate if you're in pain like that? Put the block underneath, we sit up tall, breathe, and just enjoy your practice. So I hope you found these tips helpful. If you have any questions or you'd like to see any of these other moves done in more detail, please leave your comments below. Also, if you're looking for any fun flows, I hope you check out my other videos, or if you have a video you'd like to see in the future, please let me know. Thank you so much for your time. So grateful. Namaste.